What up Wargamers, I'm Alex with our Wargame, and today I'll be showing you how to eye paint my Vertus Praetors of the Adeptus Custodes Aquilan Shield Host. Okay, so here we are with the actual model, which has been assembled in three pieces: the base, the rider, and the bike. I have primed the rider and the bike in matte white, and I'm now using the true copper paint from the army painter. You can see it in the back there. I have of course thinned it down with quite a bit of water. For this part I will be using a medium-sized base brush, as I want to cover a few large surfaces such as these armor plates by the boots and the Aquilan symbols on the model as well. For this part you should not worry too much about hitting details that should not be covered, as you have plenty of time to clean it up. As you can see here, we've now finished up with some of the details of the cover and are ready to proceed on. This is, as I mentioned, for anything that should be gold. Moving on, we are now painting the bike. And there you go, you can probably see the heads now, as I'm getting into the golden details of this as well. Broad surfaces are very good targets for paints that are this metallic. And this is the base metallic we will be using. It is not the final gold product. This entire painting sequence will be done in 3 steps, as we are going to base, shade and highlight for most of the details on the miniature. As you can see, we have started to get quite a few nice details on the bike by now. It's turning quite bronzy already. The brush, I'm trying to only coat the top 50% at max of the brush, because if you get it too close to the roots, it could start splitting, and we really don't want that. About brush choice, I use a cheap discount brush that my wife got for me at the local supermarket, and so far it's held together for 3 to 4 weeks with painting nearly every single day. So I am quite satisfied with the results gotten from that. Now we're moving on to the next step, where we'll be using plate mail metal for any pieces of metal on the model that we want to be bright and have a shiny. This would include the places that will have blue power metal and the wings of the Aquilan, as you can see here. I'm still sticking with the base brush, but as you can see, I'm being a bit more careful to not strike any of the parts that I don't want to get the paint on, as going back and cleaning can be quite the chore if you mess up too many times. So the plate mail metal has the good quality of not being too thick for a metallic paint, and so it's great for things where you want to apply colors on top of them later on. As you can see here with the wall glaive, or wall spear, guardian spear I think they're called, guardian lance maybe, yeah, well, I'm applying it quite loosely with the intention of covering it in a blue color later on. This is to add that shine that is going to make it seem more metallic while keeping the energetic properties of the blue as well. We're trying to twist it here to attempt to get into every single little crevice with this metallic paint. We'll now be painting up the bike, and once again we'll be sticking to these wings for the metallic parts, and also I believe we'll be going for the viewing screen as well. This is again to have that screenish effect once we cover it with other colors. The bike was pretty different from the rider to paint up, as many of the surfaces were a lot broader and had many crevices that were quite easy to miss. If I didn't keep a watch out, I had to go back over recording and clean up quite a few white spots where I thought I'd covered, but due to the stroke simply not being broad enough on this brush, it didn't work out quite as intended. Yes, here we go, here we go. The display is also being applied with plate mail metal. Now we're moving on again. And we're going to be applying gunmetal. Yes, we're going for the darker metal pieces here, and we'll be applying gunmetal to those. Gunmetal is much thicker than the plate mail metal, and so is well suited for any type of metal that you want to have a darker tone later on. Be it if you want to apply, if you want a piece of metal to be black, applying gunmetal on top of the matte white first can be a pretty good idea, because that will give it more metallic properties once you apply your black tint to it later on. We'll be applying this to any remaining parts of the power lance weapon he has. We'll be applying it to the belt buckle, to the vestments, and we'll be applying it to the ducts or ventilators, what you want to call those things on their backs that they, I think they're like air filtration systems, but I never actually read an instruction manual on Astartes or Custodian armor that included that part. It would make sense though. Well, yeah, anything you want to put together with regular metal, you should be using these colors, this color for. Still remember, even though you would like for it to be covered very well in metal, you should still make sure that you thin it down quite a bit, so that it doesn't clog, because clogging paints are very difficult to deal with once you have moved on. Now, as you can see on the bike, I am already applying a metallic color to it as well. To mostly anything remaining on the bike, actually. The bike in itself is a metallic creation, and it's not supposed to have, in my opinion, a lot of stand out. It's supposed to be this very smooth, very... Okay, so now we're moving into the next part of painting this miniature, and we'll be using pure red, again from the Army Painters range. We'll be applying this to the hair of the custodian, the ponytail, and we will be applying it to the small gemstones that are attached to his body. And you can be very, very thick with this coat. It doesn't matter if you lose a few details on the hair, because it's going to sink in and become much more in tone with the layers once you apply the shading tone later on. Keeping with the medium brush here, but I am making a few mistakes, and you would like to be more careful than I am here, because I am hitting a few inches of the helm, not inches, but like millimeters or something. I'm hitting the helm, and that's a problem, because I have to come back and fix it later on, and that's sad, because a bit more focus could have fixed that without any problems. We're now moving into painting the black. We have also applied the purple in between these, but that footage was sadly lost. We're applying matte black from the Army Painter to the pants areas of the Marine. I like to use matte black for things that I don't think has to take a lot of attention on the model. The good thing about black is that it's not really worth noticing, and it's quite easy to highlight by mixing with most forms of gray if you want to create small surfaces that are more in tone with the lighting of the rest of the model. It's also good for clearing up things that you wouldn't be able to reach normally, like say there's a detail that has been lost in between an arm and a shoulder pad. Like, it's a good color to cover that up so you don't lose anything. So we're moving into the power now, and we'll be using crystal blue, again from the Army Painter. Give it a good shake and get it pretty damn wet, because you'll be using this more like a glaze than an actual paint. As you can see here, it's quite thin and quite bright as I apply it to the metal. Now, another reason for wanting this to be thin is that you want it to really sink into the metal. You want it to really coat together with the metal to create the shining effect that I mentioned when we applied the plate metal. By thinning this down with water, creating this glazing effect, you are going to be getting a much smoother transition between the two colors, making more of the metallic details on the surface that are higher up, like these small wiries. They're going to be much easier to locate. Again, as you can see there, they don't actually turn blue, they turn this bluish hue, but not blue all the way through, and that is because the glaze has turned as well. You have to get, like what I did there, you have to stroke it quite a few times to make sure that the paint doesn't clog, because that will create some visual disturbances that we really don't want with this. So we're now moving to the bike, and there's only a little power here for me. I'm using the power on the engine. I want it to be a power engine, and also it kind of causes it to stand just a bit out from the rest of the model, seeing as otherwise this could easily become a very golden metal model. And there's nothing wrong with that. A golden metal model is still a very decently painting model and could look quite nice on its own, but I like to give it this hue, this tint, that the power is flowing through, and you can get this feel of the engines that are pulsing underneath it and causing the bike to accelerate. Same thing here with these gears attached to the side. Not quite sure what they're actually supposed to be, but I'm going to give them this blue hue so you can see that the power is echoing from them. Imagining the acceleration as it charges across the field, preferably towards the Chaos Lord that it's about to run over and chop into tiny little pieces upon reaching him. As you can see, I'm still using the broad brush, and that's because I kind of like it when you can see that there's a bit of blue around it, the place that you're actually painting, when you're painting with power. It's like the light that emanates from such places. I kind of like that to be quite visual from it. It can get a bit too thick, but then you'll have to you can always come back to clean up when you've made a mistake. Just always keep that in mind. Wow, that's a lot of always. We're now moving into the part of painting that I didn't discover until quite a few years ago, which is shading. Shading is so very important, and I'm using the Army Painter Strong Tone. Now, I've used Null Oil and all of the other Citadel range shades, but nothing's ever sat quite as well with me as this Strong Tone. To me, it's not just like a brown shade, like many people compare it to Acrylic Surface Shade, but it's not just brown. It like does something to the armor, creating this this gleam, this gloss-like effect that really just gets in there. Also, while it looks to be brown upon first being applied, it sort of tints and doesn't get that brown. It doesn't get like earthen brown. It's more like a bronzy, rusty brown, which sort of suits the metallic style and the gothic style of the Warhammer universe. So when I apply my tones, I'm using a very broad brush. And I'm running over the same crevasses many times because I want the tone to get in the crevices. I want it to create the shine, but I definitely don't want it to clog. There's like a few things worse than a brown clog of something, a brown pool, as you will, of tone that has been gathered way too much and is now creating a disturbance across the entirety of the miniature. You can already see the tone working on these pictures, actually, on this footage. It takes such a short time for strong tone to start to set into effect, and once it is finished completely by setting into its effect, it creates this very nice hue and makes I haven't seen anything yet. I think that it doesn't make scene like at least 50% more epic. Actually, this, if you're going for tabletop ready standard when you're painting your miniatures, this step would actually be your final step in painting, aside from obviously cleaning up any mistakes that you've made along the way. I'm sorry for dropping a bit off camera there. Still getting used to the angles, not angles, when pointing it around and directing the zoom. I am, however, liking the shots we're getting. I think you can clearly see here how the tone is like sinking into the seat and making this bright wet leathery brown that we had from earlier, really making it more like a darker tone. I'm also sorry for losing both the purple and the leather brown appliance of the paint earlier. The footage was lost in translation. In other words, the software was annoying. Well, as you can see here, the strong tone is starting to really bring out the details of the bike, making it seem much more like an animate object as opposed to an inanimate toy. And I really think that's what shading does better than most other things. Moving on, just to quickly showcase one of the ways to apply technical paint to a base. I'm using Sterling Mud, I think it's called, from the Citadel Paint range. As a base, I will also be applying Tuft and Snow and such from the Army Painter from Gamer's Grass, but using this to get just a bit of a surface on it to make it seem more like natural. It's quite good for that. I'm applying it using a letter opener, actually, which has turned out to be very efficient in really spreading out that muddy texture. We have now waited about an hour for the strong tone to dry, and we're moving into the alien purple again, and that's because I want the purple to be more thick, more heavy after the toning. What usually happens is that it looks well enough for the metal, but the cloth can get quite a bit stretched, and if you're thinking of silk, if you're thinking of heavy fabrics or light fabrics, it'll have a much more clear tint than metal will. And it was my younger brother actually who first alerted me to the fact that I was treating my cloth way too much like metal, and that the coats had to be much more non-transparent when you're painting silken cloth and such. And so I've started to apply just a few more layers to the cloth parts, and also to any places where the paint has started to drop off. This is an issue that I've had for a while, that sometimes I don't let the paint sit just enough, like maybe just another minute of drying could fix this. But as it turns out, the paint ends up scaling off. When I'm moving back into the glazing and we're applying Viking Blue and Crystal Blue in a mix here from the Army Painter, once again thinned down even more, because you still want that metallic tint. You really want to keep the metal below, but you also want to get more shine the further out from the spear you get. So keep applying that. Like here, I'm going back here as well to apply it. You really want that power to be shining through that power lines. So there's no doubt that you're about to strike your foe down with a weapon of great laser might. Same thing goes for this bike. We are going over here again just to clear up a few of the blue spots, because the toner did take away just a bit too much of the glow, and we want to keep that glow in there. As you can see, it gets a lot brighter with just a few simple brush strokes, and we're ready to move on again in just a moment or so. Also coming back down there, as it completely took it away. Which wasn't, of course, the intention. I've considered moving the step where I apply the blue paint to after applying the tone, just to have a more clear view of where I actually wanted to go, and so that the tone will not be taking away any of the bright particle effects that we're going for here. If you look at the bike, you can see how much the tone is actually done already, because the bright look looks so amazing. We're now moving into the dry brushing area. This is a technique that I don't know why. It's supposed to be simple. I had a lot of difficulties mastering it, and so I am very happy that I can now do it just about properly. I'm using bright gold, which I've thinned down in my dry palette, and then I'm using my broad brush to dry brush it, which is, you get a lot of paint in the brush, and then you stroke it on a piece of paper until all of the paint is completely gone, and then you wipe it across the miniature in these small, hefty, swift motions, so that it applies mostly to the edges. You will be keeping a lot of the surfaces intact in the bronze, the copper tones, or the surface tones that you had before, but you'll be creating highlights by dry brushing it. I've also found that for me it creates this very nice matte color, which goes quite well with a lot of the miniatures that I paint, especially with tanks. If you're using Venetian grey, you can create a very nice snowy effect on for example, the Primaris repulsor, and that makes it quite nice to look at. It also most commonly used, I think, for places such as this, where you want to highlight insignia or heraldry on the miniatures, but you really don't want to hit the leather beneath on the boots. And so I dry brush the Aquilas to make it seem nice. Here on the bike, you can definitely see the dry brush starting to take effect. Like the skull is getting much clearer than the surface beneath it. There are clear crevices down below. And each of the surfaces, I have starting to see this sparkling golden gleam as I strike my brush across it. You can see the glitter getting into play here, creating some very, very nice looking surfaces here. I think I might have had a bit too much paint on the brush here, as the bike is itself turning a bit too golden, but you can still sort of make out the copper tint below, and it was quickly fixed, as you can see. Applying a lot up here, because you wanted to have that shiny surface that makes it seem really, really well thought out and well plotted, and metallic when viewed from top down. Whenever I'm painting a Warhammer miniature, or any wargame miniature actually, I'm trying to imagine mostly what it looks down at from like the top down. Of course, I don't want to miss any details from the sides and such, but it's primarily going to be viewed during gameplay, and that's mostly top down for like, what, 99% of all miniatures, Imperial Knights and Demon Primarchs being the exception here. And that's sort of why I'm trying to get the gleam really, really on the top and not quite as much on the bottom. It's also sort of an attempt to create lighting effects based on where the light would have directly come from during the battle. Like, of course, it would shine more on top if it's a sunny day than it is doing on the bottom. You can actually see here the camera is having some trouble keeping up with it with my dry brushing. Next up with my dry brushing is the plate mail metal yet again, and we're going to be applying it to these, like every metal surface, on the gunmetal, on the wings, on the chassis, on the pipelines, any edge that we can find that is sort of metallic. We'll have this applied to it. Just to make out that difference and keep the surfaces nice and smooth. As you can see, they do quite here. It turns quite a lot smoother from just a simple small dry brush. Also applying it to the controls here. At some point I would like to revisit this model and other models that have screens on them and start to paint in things like by freehand, like a radar icon targeting enemy units and such. But I feel like freehanding is something that you really need to dedicate a lot of time to. You can't just get it over with. And it takes a lot more preparation for me to do freehand stuff. And so I usually keep it for miniatures that I have a lot of time set aside for. Like if I have a weekend of painting because my children aren't at home or something like that, then I could probably go for some freehand practice. But for everyday painting such as this, this is the sort of painting I do almost every day, I think it's important that we get these swift strategies worked out so we can actually get our miniatures done in time to be used. That is at least the way I have chosen to combat my enormous pile of shame. Right, once again, we are still at the plain metal, but for the rider we'll be applying it to the black metal, to the gun metal, and to the silver wings as well. During the step where I did the dry brush with gold, I got a bit too much on the silver. And so in this step we're going to be trying to fix that without causing another incident. As you can see, I'm also adding the metallic tint now to the surfaces of the black, which is creating this depth effect of going from the bright underneath to the black, and then once again to the brightness on the surface. And I really like that effect when I'm painting up my weapons on my models. I think it looks quite nice indeed. In general, these are my first Custodes. I've painted only the Adeptus Shield Captain before this, and I must say these have been some of my favorite miniatures to paint overall. Now we're dry brushing just a bit at the tip of the spear, the striking points, because we really want we want the shine to be there. We really want the edges to be visible and glimmering, but we don't want to strike at the blue under any circumstances. We don't want to ruin this nice power effect that we have growing on the spear. I'm now being a bit more aggressive towards the pole because I'm having issues turning the color. It's like I might have a bit too little paint on my brush, but in the end we managed to fix it up. Now it's time for some blending. We'll be blending demonic yellow with pure red to create an orange tint that we'll be using to dry brush at the hair. Now this is where things went a bit downhill for me, because I couldn't get this color to set. It was being just a regular downer and didn't want to cooperate, and so the hair here is definitely not turning out as planned. If you'd like to see what I did have planned for it, you can go to my Instagram. Link will be in the description and reference will be at the end of this video, and view the Adeptus Shield Captain that I painted yesterday, because it got the color just right from doing the exact same thing. I have no idea what went wrong with this one, but it didn't want to set in the same manner as its predecessor did. But we'll be using the same color we just blended for all of the red orbs on his armor, for all of the jewelry, all of the small things that we want to have that light little sparkle that sets it out from the rest of the model. There you go, and as you can see, I sort of hesitated there because I noticed I messed up, and I'm coming back to clean that by using some more true copper later on. Constantly going back, revisiting and fixing your errors as you go along. I think it's very important to yourself, because otherwise you might, I do at least, I lose track of where I was and how I got there, and then I'll lose track of which errors I know I made. As you can see, the red from the dry brush has now struck the armor once again, and I'll be coming back to clean that up off camera, of course, because you don't want to be watching me just clean up the miniature. And the red for the bike is the small part. We will be adding a bit more glow to the bike's missiles, to the flak missiles here, I think they're called. It's called the salvo launcher, whatever it is that's firing them. And you just want, again, the tip just enough so that you notice that they're there and that they're different from the rest of the metal on the bike, but not so much so that it completely takes over from the rest of the bike. Also, I'm applying it to the Misericordia back there, because the red orb is there. And we'll even be applying it, just as you can see, just very carefully down to the inner side of the orb as well. You have to be really careful when you're going between metals, because that's a lot of work to clean up if you should mess up. We're now adding a bit of oozing purple, and that's in a dry brush. And don't worry if this is wet, because somehow oozing purple and alien purple like melt together once applied. So you apply the dry brush like me, you can see it do it very loosely. But as you'll see in the final picture that's about to come up, it's going to like melt away into the rest of the purple and just make the surfaces that we want it to be brighter actually be brighter. It's like sorcery paints. I'm sure some physicists or painting enthusiasts with a chemical background could explain in more detail than I could, but for now know that it's going to blend in quite well. You can already see that it's blending in quite well over there. And so here we are, the final product, the finished miniature, my first ever Vertus Praetor painted up on his bike. Looking quite nice there, and ready to take out the enemies of the Emperor with smooth, harsh judgment. Well, that was that, Wargamers. Thank you a lot for watching this video. There were a few bumps, of course, in both the editing and the angles of the actual recording. Thing is, this is the first time I'm testing out this tripod, the first time I'm testing out this camera, and it's been about a year and a half, 2 years since I've last used this editing software. So it's a bit rough around the edges, but I feel like you get what I'm trying to the points that I'm trying to make across. I really hope you enjoyed this. As I said, if you're looking for more painting content, I would like to recommend you to go to my Instagram page, which is AlexPaintsWH. I post nearly every day as I'm running the hashtag challenge a mini a day 2021. You can also keep following us here for more painting, more battle reports are incoming. I've got these Custodes lined up. I've got some Thousand Suns, Necrons, Ultramarines, and my friends are about to bring over some Iron Hands, I think they're called, Iron Warriors, Chaos Space Marines, some Orcs, some Admech, and perhaps we'll see what else is going to pop up, as I'm also writing for a narrative campaign that will be appearing on this channel due 2021 at some point. Please go ahead and leave any feedback you might have for this video in the comments below. Shout out to Tabletop Warbands for shouting out to me. That was very nice of you guys, and I'd like to return the favor. They do some awesome Kill Team bad reps, and they also started on doing Combat Patrol Incursions and Strike Force bad reps for 40k, I believe, and they have turned out quite nicely as well. Well, nothing more to say, Wargamers. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it once again, and I'll see you all in the next game.